My parents sold my childhood home to pay my sister's debts, so I bought it back without them, knowing, and left them begging. I'm a 28-year-old guy, and for as long as I can remember, my sister Emily was the golden child. She could crash the car, fail her exams, scream at our mom, and somehow she'd still end up being hugged and told she was just going through a phase. Meanwhile, if I left a single dish in the sink, I'd get a lecture about setting an example and being the responsible one. It's like our parents had two sets of rules, one for their perfect little princess and another for the invisible son, who just happened to live there too. I wasn't a rebellious kid. I kept to myself. I did my homework, mowed the lawn without being asked, and never got into trouble. I learned early on that being quiet and dependable wouldn't win me affection, but it would, at least, keep me out of the line of fire. So I became the background character in my own house, fading into the wallpaper, while Emily sucked all the oxygen out of the room. When things got too loud, I'd escape to my room, the only space that felt like mine. I'd sit on the floor beside the window, earphones in, sketching or reading, until the chaos downstairs faded to a dull hum. That house, it wasn't just walls and windows. It was where I learned how to survive emotional neglect. Every creaking floorboard and chipped baseboard held memories not all good, but mine. I never said anything. I thought maybe, if I just kept being good, they'd eventually notice. That maybe one day, they'd thank me for not being a problem. That day never came, and the more I watched Emily get away with everything, the harder it became to ignore the bitterness crawling under my skin. I didn't know it yet, but the home I loved so much, the only place I ever felt like I belonged, was already slipping away from me. I'm not sure when it officially crossed the line from annoying favoritism to something deeper, but by the time Emily turned 20, it was obvious she could burn the entire world down, and our parents would hand her the match. She bounced from one failed job to another, leaving behind unpaid bills and damaged friendships like breadcrumbs. Every time she crashed and burned, Mom would sigh dramatically and say, "She just needs support. She's sensitive." Sensitive. That was their word for her. Mine was irresponsible. Meanwhile, if I got home 10 minutes late from work, my dad would be waiting in the living room like some disappointed warden. "Why didn't you call?" I was finishing inventory. You know your mother worries. Emily could disappear for 2 full nights, and they'd text her heart emojis. I remember one night in particular, Emily stormed into the house crying because she'd been fired from yet another job at a cafe. She threw her apron on the floor, shouted about how her boss hated her, and locked herself in her room. 20 minutes later, Mom was knocking softly, asking, "Sweetheart, do you want tea? We know it wasn't your fault." I stood in the hallway holding my backpack after a 10-hour shift, smelling like sweat and metal. Mom glanced at me and said, "Can you keep it down tonight? She's upset." I hadn't even spoken. I started understanding something painful. My hard work wasn't admirable to them. It was expected. It was the bare minimum. But Emily's disasters were treated like precious little storms she needed rescuing from. Still, I tried to be the good son. I kept my head down, saved money, stayed out of trouble. But there was this growing knot in my chest every time I watched them excuse her, praise her, coddle her. And somewhere deep inside, resentment was beginning to solidify, slow, heavy, unavoidable. I didn't know it yet, but Emily's mistakes were about to take a much bigger toll, one that would push me past any illusion of family loyalty I still had left. I moved out when I was 22. No big speech, no dramatic blow-up, just quiet boxers packed over a weekend and a key left on the kitchen counter. I'd gotten a decent job after trade school, saved enough for a small apartment an hour away. I thought maybe, just maybe, they'd tried to stop me, or at least ask why, but no one did. When I told my mom I'd signed a lease, she just blinked. "That's sudden," she said. Dad barely looked up from his paper. Emily rolled her eyes and muttered, "Whatever. It's not like you're ever around anyway." I waited for something else, a hug, a question, anything, but it never came. I left on a cloudy Tuesday morning, cramming my last box of books into my back seat. The house was quiet. No one even came to the door. As I pulled out of the driveway, I stared at the porch steps, half expecting my mom to come running out and say she was proud of me. Instead, the wind blew a crumpled grocery receipt across the yard. That silence followed me into my new life. For a while, I kept calling once a week, hoping things would change now that I wasn't under their roof. The conversations were always short. Emily's been going through a tough time. Emily might need a loan. Emily got into a fight with her boyfriend again. They never asked about my work, my apartment, my life. I eventually stopped calling, but even as I built my own routine work, sleep, quiet evenings, with my sketchpad I couldn't shake the ache. That house, for all its dysfunction, still haunted me. It was the only place I ever felt grounded. The creaky stairs, the way the morning light hit the kitchen sink, even the chipped paint on my bedroom door, they were my history. I thought I had finally escaped the toxicity. But what I didn't know then was that the house, the one piece of my childhood I still clung to, was about to become a casualty in Emily's chaos. The call came on a random Thursday afternoon, one of those perfectly ordinary days that gets scorched into your memory forever. I was driving home from work, halfway through my usual podcast, when my phone buzzed. It was my mom. I hadn't heard her voice in weeks, maybe months. I figured it was one of those strained check-ins maybe, another Emily meltdown or borrowed money request. But as soon as I answered, I knew something was off. Her voice was shaky, too soft, honey. We had to sell the house. At first, I didn't register it. Sell the house? What? I asked, already pulling over, heart thudding. She sniffled. It was the only option. We were behind on the mortgage, and Emily's in real trouble. The debt collector started showing up. She could have been sued. I stared through my windshield, watching cars blur past like ghosts. So you sold it for her? Silence. Then a broken whisper. She's your sister. My voice cracked. That was my home too. Apparently, Emily had racked up tens of thousands in gambling debts, credit cards maxed out, loans taken out in her name, some not even paid off. When she came crying to my parents, they did what they always did, bent over backwards to clean up her mess. Except this time, they didn't just excuse her. They sacrificed the one thing that still meant something to me, and they never even told me. Never even asked. I hung up without saying goodbye. I sat in my car for what felt like hours, numb. My childhood wasn't perfect, but that house, it was mine in ways they never were. It was where I learned to draw, where I taped glow-in-the-dark stars to the ceiling, where I hid under the covers to escape the yelling. Now someone else would be sleeping in my room. Someone else would walk those halls. And all because Emily couldn't say no to a poker table. I thought I'd already been pushed to the edge. Turns out, I hadn't even seen the cliff yet. I didn't go into work the next day. I called in sick, but the truth is I just couldn't face people. Couldn't pretend I was okay. I sat on my apartment floor all night, knees pulled to my chest like I was a kid again, replaying the call in my head over and over. They sold my memories to bail her out. By Saturday, I drove back to the old neighborhood. I didn't really know why, just needed to see it. The new owners had already moved in. There was a red SUV in the driveway, toys scattered across the lawn, and a wind chime on the porch that definitely hadn't been there before. I parked across the street and just watched. I could still hear the squeak of that front door in my head, still remember how the kitchen always smelled like coffee and cinnamon in the winter. I thought about the tiny scratch marks Emily and I made on the hallway while measuring how tall we were each birthday. I wondered if they'd painted over them. Probably it should have hurt, but sitting there, something shifted. The grief started curdling into something heavier, hotter. I wasn't just mourning the loss of a house. I was mourning the illusion that I'd ever mattered to them. They didn't even think to call me before signing the papers. I wasn't consulted. I wasn't considered. I was just forgotten. Again, and as I stared at the house I used to call mine, something in me snapped. No more playing the quiet, obedient son. No more pretending blood automatically means loyalty. They didn't just sell a house. They sold me out. And if that was the game we were playing, fine, I'd learn the rules. And I'd start planning. I didn't know how or when, but one day that house would be mine again. And when it was, they'd feel what it was like to be on the outside looking in. It happened almost exactly a year later, so randomly, I thought it was a joke at first. A former neighbor, Mrs. Dillard, messaged me on Facebook. We hadn't spoken in years, but her message hit like lightning. Hey, sweetheart, heard your old place is going back on the market. The family's relocating. Thought you might want to know. My heart stopped. I clicked on the link she attached. It was a fresh real estate listing, my childhood home. Same bricks, same porch, even the same lopsided mailbox. They were moving. The house was for sale. I stared at the screen for what felt like an hour. This was it. My shot. But I didn't want anyone knowing, not Emily, not my parents, especially not them. I didn't want some teary phone call or a guilt trip about how we all have memories there. No, that house was theirs until they sold it out from under me. Now it was going to be mine. Quietly, completely. I called a friend of mine, Jared, who worked in real estate. Can you help me buy a property? Anonymously. He chuckled at first, trying to dodge a stalker. Worse, I said. Family? Within a few days, we were in motion. Jared submitted an offer under a shell LLC he set up for me. Cash, competitive, clean. I didn't blink at the price. I'd been saving for years, my own place, my business expansions. But this wasn't just a purchase. It was a reclaiming. 2 weeks later, the offer was accepted, no counter. No delay, no suspicion, just like that. I owned it, the house. My house. I didn't tell a soul. I changed the locks the day after escrow closed. Had the deed transferred under a name they wouldn't recognize, standing inside those empty walls for the first time in years. I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Power. They took everything from me once. But now, the board had flipped, and it was my move. The first night I stepped into the house alone. I swear the air felt different, like it was holding its breath. The place was empty. Echoing, stripped of the furniture and chaos, I remembered, but the memories clung to the walls like dust in the corners. I walked slowly from room to room, my footsteps hollow on the wooden floors. The wallpaper in the hallway was new, but I could still picture the crayon marks Emily made and blamed on me. The closet in the master bedroom still creaked on the left, hinged. Some things never changed. I ended up in my old bedroom. It was painted over in soft beige now, but I could still feel the outlines of the glow-and-thought stars I once stuck to the ceiling. I stood in the middle of the room, closed my eyes, and just breathed. The ghosts weren't scary. They weren't even sad. They were mine. For the first time in my life, this house truly belonged to me, not rented, not shared, not overseen by judgmental eyes. Mine. I spent the next few weeks restoring it not to what it was, but to what it should have been. I ripped out the old carpeting in the living room and laid down hardwood, painted the walls clean white, replaced the cracked kitchen tiles. I remember staring at it during silent family dinners. There was something deeply healing about it, like I was scrubbing my own childhood clean, one stroke at a time. I kept everything quiet. No posts, no friends over, no traceable paper trail back to me. I didn't want this to be about revenge yet, but every time I touched a wall or turned a doorknob, I felt it in my chest. This wasn't just a renovation. This was reclamation. This was the life I should have had. And as I stood on the back porch one evening, watching the sun dip behind the trees, I knew the peace wouldn't last, because secrets this big, they never stay buried for long. It started with a text from Emily, short, snippy, and too smug to be innocent. Nice place. Didn't think you had the balls. I stared at the screen for a long time, heart pounding. She knew. I didn't respond. Within the hour, my phone rang. Mom lit up across the screen. I didn't answer. A second later, Dad, then Emily again. I let it all ring out. But by the next morning, they were standing on my front porch like ghosts from a past I never invited back. I opened the door just enough to see their faces. My mother looked stunned, like she couldn't believe I actually answered. Dad was stone-faced, jaw clenched. Emily wore her usual smirk like she owned the world and couldn't wait to burn it. My mom stepped forward first. Why didn't you tell us? I leaned against the doorframe. Did you tell me when you sold it? Her eyes darted to the ground. That was different. No, it wasn't, Emily scoffed. This is petty. You think this proves something? I looked her dead in the eye. No, it reclaimed something. My dad finally spoke. We were going through a hard time. We did what we had to do for the family. I nodded slowly. And now I'm doing what I have to do for myself. They stood there, waiting maybe for me to soften, to invite them in, to say, I forgive you. But the silence between us was heavier than anything words could fix. Finally, my mother's voice broke. Can we just come inside? For a minute, I stared past them, at the tree in the yard we planted when I was 10, the same one they ignored when I begged them to tie a tire swing to it. "No," I said quietly, "not this time." Then I closed the door, locked it in for the first time in my life. I felt it slam for me, not against me, but I knew them. This wouldn't be the end. They weren't finished trying to crawl their way back in 3 days later. I opened my inbox to find a long email from my father. No subject line, just a wall of text that read like a eulogy for a version of me they never actually knew. He wrote about how family is all we have, how they did their best, and how it was unfair of me to punish them for one difficult decision. One decision. They sold my entire childhood for a daughter who's been drowning for years, and expected me to throw her the life raft. Buried halfway through the email was the real reason he wrote. Money, he said. They were struggling. That they'd used the profits from the house to pay off Emily's debts, but now their own finances were unraveling. Rent was too high. Groceries were getting expensive. Emily had lost another job. Again, then came the kicker. "We were wondering if you'd consider letting us move in for a little while, just until things stabilize." I laughed, out loud. Right there at my kitchen table, I had imagined this moment before, dreamed of finally hearing them admit they were wrong, that they needed me. But this didn't feel victorious. It felt like a test, like they still believed I owed them something. That being their son meant my boundaries were optional. Later that night, Emily sent a voice message. Her voice was syrupy sweet, dripping with fake sincerity. "I know we've had our issues, but come on. You know, Mom and Dad aren't doing well. You won already. Can't you just let it go?" Let it go. Let what go? The years of being invisible. The dismissal. The guilt. The house sold behind my back. I played her message twice, letting every syllable burn into my memory. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel guilt. I felt clarity, because if they thought I was going to cave, they still had no idea who I'd become. And the next move, it was going to be mine on my terms, with no apologies. I didn't respond to the emails or voice messages for days. I needed time not to think, but to cool down enough to respond without burning the whole bridge to ash. I wasn't interested in petty revenge. I wanted something deeper, something final, so I replied. One short message to my father: "I won't be housing the people who sold me out. I've listed the place for short-term rental. Guests only. Best of luck." And I meant every word. I listed the house on a premium rental platform. High-end listing. No long-term stays. No names I recognized would ever walk through those doors again. I installed smart locks, surveillance cameras, and a full security system. I even had the entry log sent directly to my phone. Not because I was paranoid, but because I knew the people I was dealing with. The first week, a couple from out of state stayed there. Left a glowing review. The second week, a young family with a golden retriever. I dropped by occasionally to water the backyard plants or make sure the cleaners did their job. And every time I stepped onto the porch, I felt lighter, cleaner. But it didn't take long for the fallout to hit. My aunt called me crying, saying my parents were devastated, that they were now renting a rundown 2-bedroom across town with mold on the ceiling and no heat. That Emily was sleeping on the couch because she refused to get a job. That they were embarrassed to tell people they were struggling. I asked her a simple question. Did they mention why they're in that position? She went silent. Exactly, let them sit with the consequences. Let them explain to the world how they sold their son's home to save their daughter's ego. For once in my life, I wasn't bending. I wasn't making room. I wasn't softening myself to make their chaos easier to live with. This wasn't vengeance. This was a line in the sand. And I was done letting them step over it. It started with a knock. I wasn't even at the house. I was across town when my phone pinged. The doorbell camera captured my mother, standing on the porch with a Tupperware container in her hands, like it was still 2006 and she was dropping off leftovers. Behind her, my father hovered awkwardly, arms crossed, eyes darting around like he didn't want to be seen. I watched the footage in silence, jaw clenched. Then came the text, "Mom, we just want to talk, please. We're sorry. Dad, we messed up. We thought we were doing what was right. Can we come in?" I didn't reply that night. I got a call from an unknown number. Against my better judgment, I answered. It was Emily. "Look," she started, her voice low, tired, almost Defeated? I know I've been a mess. I know I've done some horrible things, but they're not doing well. Dad's blood pressure is through the roof, and Mom cries every day. They're not sleeping. I stayed quiet. I know you hate me, she continued, but they're your parents. Can't you find it in you to just what? I snapped. Pretend none of it happened? That they didn't sell the only place I ever felt safe just to bail you out again? She was silent. Then she whispered, "You're not the only one who's hurting." That did it? No. Emily, but I'm the only one who paid for it. I hung up. I sat in my living room that night, staring at the ceiling, and for the first time, I felt settled, not angry, not bitter, just done. I didn't need them to hurt. I didn't need them to cry. All I needed was space, and they were finally on the outside, looking in exactly where they left me all those years ago. The first time, I spent the night in the house, not just visiting for maintenance or guests. I didn't sleep, not because I was anxious, because it was quiet. There was no arguing behind closed doors, no footsteps pacing outside my room, no tight-lipped silences or muttered passive-aggressive remarks. Just me, a warm cup of tea, the soft hum of the heater, and a house that finally felt like a home, not a battlefield. I walked barefoot through every room that night, touching the walls, feeling the wood beneath my feet. I lit a candle in the kitchen and sat at the island, remembering the hundreds of nights I'd eaten dinner there in silence, while Emily went on and on about her day, and my parents hung on her every word. There was only me, and the calm I'd carved out of years of noise. I replaced the curtains in the living room, pulled down every old photo, every relic of the past, planted a new oak tree in the backyard, one I'd grow from scratch. Not the one we planted as a family and then neglected. This one would be mine. Watered by peace, grown from spite, maybe, but blooming all the same. The guest book on the rental listing filled with kind notes from travelers' lovely home, so peaceful, felt like a retreat. That one made me smile, because it was a retreat from the people who never saw me, from the family who expected me to carry everything and then threw me aside, from a sister who turned chaos into currency, and parents who cashed it in at my expense. I didn't need revenge anymore. I had silence. I had boundaries. I had a front. The door that locked from the inside. And if they ever come knocking again, well, this time they'll know. I don't open my door for ghosts anymore.